Well, welcome. My name is Curry Bird. I'm the president of the Native American Society, and this is one of our speaker series. Last month we had Dr. Ryan Emanuel speaking on environmental justice and related water quality. And this month we're featuring Dr. Tracie Locklear. And Dr. Locklear is a pharmacologist. Sorry about that, Tracie. And natural products chemist. Her research evaluates the role of plant nutrients in human health and wellness. She is a research assistant professor at North Carolina Central University and teaches clinical research and methodology. She's an environmental activist and works closely with communities interested in the reestablishment of healthy foods traditions and the support of food security and sovereignty. She's also a member of the Lumbee and Coharie tribes, and I welcome Dr. Tracie Locklear.
Thank you so much, Curry, for having me. Thank you guys so much for being here and taking time out of your evening to listen to me talk and share my passion for traditional medicine with all of you. Today's topic is on elderberry medicinal use ID medicine making, and just want to talk real briefly before I get into the presentation about just the importance of medicinal herbs and being aware of your environment, being aware of our impact on our environment. And if you were present for Ryan Emanuel's talk last month, he talks a lot about being good stewards and water is life. And I think, I take that from a very different perspective, thinking about our impact on the natural world. And so today we're going to be talking about elderberries. So if I can just get my presentation to show. Give me 1 second. All right, so hopefully you guys can all see this.
Yep.
All right, great. So today's topic is elderberry identification, traditional uses, and medicinal syrup recipes. So my husband and I have put together 2 really short videos for you that I hope, just kind of like break up the monotony of like listening to me talk and just looking at me all day for the next hour. So I wanted to I know everybody's kind of like zoomed out and WebExed out. So I wanted to kind of break it up a little bit. But thinking about elderberry, elder is one of these very really old world type plants that have been around for millennia and have been used as medicine for millennia by native people here in North America, as well as people all over Europe, Asia, and Africa. It's one of those plants that has earned the name as nature's medicine chest. And for very good reason. It has uses ranging from being used for swelling and high blood pressure to being used for fever, colds, and flus. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But in terms of elderberry, there are 10 species, and 4 of which you can find here in North America. We're going to be talking specifically about Sambucus canadensis, which is the North American variety of elderberry, as well as European black elderberry, which is Sambucus nigra. So let me, before we talk about that, I really just want to say one more thing briefly, that I am the co-director of the North Carolina Native American Ethnobotany Project. And the goal of our program has been, so far, it was established in 2018. And the goal has really been to document, preserve, and share traditional knowledge with our communities and with the world, and protect this knowledge for future generations. as we all know, as Indigenous people all over the world, we're caretakers for our land. And our knowledge, like our languages, can be lost forever if we don't do anything to protect it. And so, by being here today and sharing this knowledge, I want to just share what I know with you in terms of traditional medicine. And today, we're going to start by sharing a little bit about North American elderberry. So I have a short video, please don't judge me, but I have a short video that my gracious husband has created for me. So I'm gonna play this now.
Hey everybody, Tracie Locklear here with the North Carolina Native American Ethnobotany Project, and I'm out here in the August summer heat to talk a little bit about elderberry. So I've been getting a lot of questions about how to identify elderberry. So elderberry is part of the plant family Adoxaceae, and not only is this plant part of North America, it's native in Europe, it's native in parts of Asia, as well as parts of Africa. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how to identify elderberry if you're out on a nature walk. Here I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, actually, and as you can see around me, we have a little bit of a stream. We're in the middle of the city, so you probably hear some cars behind me. But even here, even in the middle of the city, you can still find these little patches of nature around you. And here I was able to find a little patch of elderberry. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how, when you're out in nature, how to identify this beautiful plant. So the one thing I want to say about this plant is if you look at the base of it, you will see that the bark is gray and it is smooth. But once you get closer to it, you can see it has these little bumps to it. They're called lenticels, all right? And so that's one way that you can identify elderberry. The other is that the leaves are opposite each other. So here's one leaf, here's a tiny one here, and then here's the other one. And if you can see on the stem of the branch, it is directly opposite each other. And they are pinnately compound leaves. And what do I mean when I say pinnately compound? So normally when you see oak trees or maple trees, you see a one full broad leaf. And this, and for the elderberry, this is the full leaf. And so when I say pinnately compound, I mean that it has leaflets, small little leaves. So here you have the full leaf. So you have the petiole here, which is the part that attaches to the twig. And then you have the leaf blade. In this case, the leaf blade has tiny little leaflets. And you can see these side leaflets, all right? And then a leaflet at the top. So you have 6 side leaflets and a leaflet here at the top. And this is what we mean by pinnately compound leaf, okay? And if you notice, these little leaflets are also opposite each other, just like the leaves of the elderberry. And it's a little bit lighter green on the back side and darker green on the front side. This being August, normally elderberry is in season. You will see these beautiful, ripe, dark berries. But in this case, these berries have not ripened. And not only have they not ripened, but they have been picked clean by the birds. So this is the inflorescence of elderberry. This is where between April and June, mid-spring, you would find the most beautiful ivory-colored small flowers. These little green unripened berries kind of fall in like an umbel, and what this is called a sign, okay? Because these flowers can be really big. They can be like 10 to 12 inches across in diameter, and they're really lacy and very beautiful. The flowers themselves are typically really small and white. They have 5 petals and 5 stamens. So on this branch, I was able to find some berries that are starting to ripen. So it's still not covered, by the way. So some of the berries have fallen off or been eaten by the birds, not sure which. But as you can see, you see some green berries and some berries that are starting to ripen. So they're red right now, but by early September, these berries will be black. And so generally, this entire inflorescence will be covered by black, beautiful berries. So places you would want to look for elderberry includes open, sunny areas that are close to water. So it loves moist, rich soil. And so here we are next to a stream. You would find it growing in riverbanks. You would find it near lakes and ponds, also in the ditches next to farmland. Those are really great places to source out elderberry. So thank you again, and I'll talk to you next time.
Okay, so if you can't tell, my little patch of elderberry in Raleigh, I have very limited options to choose from this time of year. But I wanted to put together a video for you guys for what you're more likely to find whenever you're out foraging for elderberry. So a couple other things that I wanted to note that I didn't get a chance to talk about in that video is that if you are out looking for elderberry and you would like to use it for making medicine, I am not here to promote that or recommend it, because unless you are highly familiar with the plant, I would want you to be 100% certain of the plant before you harvest it, because there are some deadly lookalikes, such as water hemlock, that are found growing in very similar environments. Another thing about harvesting from the wild in nature and harvesting elderberry is the pay respect. I mean, this plant has been around for literally millennia and been used for medicine. And so as stewards of our environment, it's important to pay attention to what we're doing whenever we're collecting. Thirdly, harvesting in clean areas. I don't recommend harvesting in the city. Obviously, I don't recommend harvesting on farmlands where they use pesticides, or in ditches where they spray with pesticides. But if you can find a clean place that is well off the roadsides, that you trust, that you have access to, and you know the plant well enough, I think it is a great plant to introduce into your diet, as well as introducing into your garden. And so it's a great landscaping plant. And one of the great things about it is it grows very well. So you can harvest it from cuttings, and preferably I would do that in the late fall and the early parts of the winter. And you can just cut it and easily reroot it. And it would be a great plant to add into your landscape. So I want to talk briefly about the medicinal uses of elderberry, and these have been collected, particularly talking to indigenous people here in southeastern United States. The flowers are medicinal, and they have been used by the Coharie, the Lumbee, as well as other indigenous groups in North Carolina to lower fevers and induce sweating. So by inducing sweating, the flowers of elderberry are diaphoretic. So what they do is they basically, it lowers your fever by making you release, sweat as you're sweating out, like your colds or flus. It's also good for stimulating the immune system and stimulating your circulatory system as well. And the way that the flowers are typically prepared is that you could either use them fresh or dried, and you would use them in a tincture form, meaning that you would infuse them in alcohol, or you could alternatively infuse them in hot water. And in the hot water, you would drink it as a tea. An infusion in water would also be good for skin irritations. So you would use it as a compress for skin irritations if you had like a burn or a scrape or a scratch. It's good for that. The Lumbee particularly have used the flowers as a laxative and a diuretic, so really to make you increase urination. But very popularly across the UK as well as the United States, you will find that elder flowers prepared as a tea are very popular for treating colds and flus. The flowers are anti-inflammatory, and as I mentioned a little while ago, the elder plant, just in general, is just a really great pollinator plant. So the bees and butterflies just absolutely love them during the summer. A great little addition that I have found is using elder flowers in lemonades. So elderberry flower with lemon juice and maybe even some blueberries and some sugar on a hot summer day. A elderberry flower lemonade is awesome, so good. But I've also recently read about a way that you can batter and fry them. And if you guys are interested in that recipe, I can provide that for you after the talk. But you can batter them and fry them. And I had this really great idea about trying this at home. And maybe I'll make a video about trying to batter and fry and making an Indian fry bread using elder flowers. I think that would be fun. The berries are most commonly used from the elderberry plant. And the one thing that I do want to mention about the berries is that consuming raw berries can make you really nauseous. They have cyanoglycosides in them, which are compounds that can make you vomit and make you nauseous and make you really sick if you eat them, if you eat too many of them. So whenever you're using the berries, you would want to make sure that they are dried or cooked. And berries can be used for making jams and jellies and pies, as the Waccamaw. This is the way they prefer to have their elderberries. The Lumbee love to make wines out of the elderberry. The Coharie love to make syrup. So this is photo credit from Randy Bird, if you guys know Randy, and this is Adalis Jacobs, and her grandfather, Greg Jacobs, loved to go out and hunt for elderberries. So if you guys are looking for elderberries, they're probably the best people. And otherwise, using elderberries, you will most popularly find in your grocery store. It's so easy to find sambucol, maybe you've heard of that, or elderberry syrup for sale. You can find it at any local health food store, but basically it is used for colds and flus, and it's basically a honey syrup infusion of the berries. But beyond just using them for medicine, they're also a superfood. They're high in iron, potassium, vitamin C, as well as anthocyanins, antioxidants, and bioflavonoids. All of these are good for helping boost your immune system and fight free radicals that damage your DNA. The one other thing that I want to mention about elderberries that makes them so great for inflammation, colds and flus, and respiratory issues is that they're immunomodulating, which means that they control your blood cell count. So it can help you increase your cytokines, which are molecules that help fight disease, like help fight with colds and flus and infections. And so elderberries are really good for boosting your immune system that way. Roots, stems, and leaves are parts of the elderberry that are the most toxic. So the roots probably have the most amounts of cyanoglycosides, followed by the bark and the leaves. So for promoting circulation and stimulation of your circulatory system, the Cherokee and the Lumbee had really had a good medicine for how to do that. As far as the bark, it was used as you would expect. It was taken internally and it was used as a purge. So this is another treatment. So if you drink enough of the bark tea, it has enough of the cyanoglycosides in it that it would make you vomit, basically. And then the leaves, you could be used as a compress or a poultice to reduce swelling and treat skin issues such as hives. And this was a very popular therapy among the Lumbee. So now, since we've talked a little bit about the different types of ways that you can use the elder plant to make medicine, I want to show you a little homemade video about how to make elderberry syrup. So I hope you guys enjoy this.
North Carolina Native American Ethnobotany Project, and today we're going to be talking about making elderberry syrup. Now, elderberries are good all year long to help you boost your immune system. And I want to show you how you can easily make elderberry syrup at home. What we have here are black European dried elderberries that you can find at your local natural health food store. Dried elderflowers, also from your natural health food store. Ginger root, which I already have some peeled, you can find at your local grocery store. And this is going to give your syrup a little bit of a warm flavor, as well as it's also anti-inflammatory. We have some local honey, which I always believe in buying local, and honey is going to give your syrup a really good taste and help it go down better. This recipe calls for 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. And cloves are very warming and will give your elderberry syrup a little spice. And finally, we have just a little bit of bourbon that we're going to be using to preserve your syrup and give it a longer shelf life. So I have modified Rosemary Gladstar's elderberry syrup recipe from her book, Medicinal Herbs. And we're going to be combining 2 cups of dried elderberries to 4 cups of water, and we're going to put those in the pot and put it on a low boil. And we're going to set this on a low boil for about 20 minutes. So now we are going to grate our peeled ginger root. And we need about a tablespoon of grated ginger root for this recipe. Okay, looks like we have maybe good enough. And we're going to measure out how much we need of the grated ginger root. We need 1 tablespoon. So we're just going to scoop this up in here and pack it down. Make sure we have a tablespoon. And as soon as our elderberries finish boiling, we're going to strain them off and add our ginger root. Okay, looks like our elderberries have boiled. It smells so good. All right, so now we are going to strain off the elderberries and add the ginger root to our syrup. So this is a tight woven piece of cotton that we're going to use to strain our elderberries. So now I've strained my elderberries, but you don't have to throw these away. You can always use them for making pancakes or muffins later. You can even roll them out and bake them, maybe make them into like a fruit roll-up or whatever you like. So we're going to squeeze this out. Make sure we get all the liquid out of it. Okay. Now we're going to add this back into our pot to finish boiling with the ginger root and the cloves. Now we're going to add our 1 tablespoon of ginger. And we're going to add our 4th teaspoon of cloves. And we're going to add our lid back on and let this boil for about 20 minutes to boil down the liquid to about half. Okay, so now we're going to do a little something different. We're going to take the elderberries from before. You don't have to do this step unless you're using the alcohol, because while we're waiting for our elderberry syrup to boil down to 2 cups, we're going to add our 1 cup of bourbon to our elderberries. And the reason I like to do it this way is that this way we can get the most nutrients out of the berries themselves. So while we're waiting for our elderberry syrup to reduce down to 2 cups, we're going to infuse our elderberries. So now that we've infused these elderberries with our bourbon, we're going to strain these elderberries again and add the infused liquid back into our pot. Okay. And this is going to give us a nice little additional flavor of the bourbon. It's going to help us preserve our medicine. And it is also going to draw out any additional nutrients. So we have one more infusion step before we strain the elderberry syrup and add our honey, and it's going to be adding the elderberry flower. So while the syrup is still hot, we've already added the bourbon. We're going to add the elderberry flowers. Okay, 1/8 cup of elderberry flowers. We're going to mix that together. Rinse this spoon off. We're going to mix these in. And we're just going to let them infuse for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to strain our syrup and add our honey. So now we've let the elder flowers infuse in the syrup for about 20 minutes. And we're going to go ahead and strain those into our measuring cup. Okay, so now let me clean this area up a little bit so you can see what we're doing here. Now we're getting ready to add our honey. So now we have our honey. We have 1 cup of honey, as you can see. We started out with 4 cups of water. We're down to 3 cups now that we added the 1 cup of bourbon, and we're going to replace up to the 4th cup line with 1 cup of honey. We're going to mix this for a minute, and then we're going to pour it into our jars. Okay, so now it looks like this is about ready, and we're going to put it into our jars. And there you have it, elderberry syrup.
Okay, so I hope you guys were as enthralled with that as I was. So I posted here in the slides that will be made available to you my ingredients as well as my directions for that particular elderberry syrup recipe. However, I want to share another one that I absolutely love by my friend, Ricky Bratz, who is a really great herbalist and and she is the founder of Cassini Healing, holistic community health and healing, which is a small herbalism company. And so she has here a really easy, simple elderberry syrup recipe that you could try at home. And if you have problems with the alcohol, not a lot of people drink alcohol, it doesn't require alcohol for this particular recipe, and it will be really tasty. And the only problem will be not necessarily a problem, that was like poor choice of words, but you would just want to make sure that you keep it refrigerated. If you're putting alcohol in your elderberry syrup, it's less prone to go rancid versus if you're just using honey alone. If you're using honey alone, you're going to want to make sure that you refrigerate that and that you use it within 12 weeks.
So Tracie, we had a couple of questions. One was, is elderberry an invasive plant?
Well, yes and no. So no, in the sense that we have native elderberry. So elderberry, Sambucus canadensis or Sambucus nigra variety canadensis, depending on basically the year, because scientific names do tend to change. That is a North American elderberry. And there are several species of elderberry that are found in North America. However, we have transplants from Europe, which is also black elderberry, but it is the Sambucus nigra. And it is also here in the United States as well. And it grows very, very well, and it does really well. And it will take over because it'll take over your environment if you let it. Our own species, the Sambucus canadensis, it copulates by rhizomes, so it does very well. It's not necessarily an invasive species because it's native here to North America, but it will take over your space. Hopefully that answers your question.
I think so. Also, you were making the elderberry syrup and you were straining the elderberries in the cotton cloth? Mm-hmm. Does the elderberry stain wash out?
Not in my experience, but you can try. So for me, I purchased that cloth, I have cloth especially for elderberry. I used a clean one for the video because, it looks better. But that's typically just you wash it by itself and you make sure it's sterilized and dried and you zip it up and put it away and you pull it out the next time. So it's not something that I would use for anything else besides making elderberry syrup. And it doesn't necessarily have to be cloth. You can use muslin. That's the other thing that's probably most often used. But any kind of tight woven fabric would work. And the reason for that is just basically to get the tiny particulate matter out of your syrup, because you don't want to taste grit whenever you're taking your medicine.
Can you see the chat questions? Or
actually, no, I can't because of my presentation's taking up the whole
All
space.
Right.
I'm sorry.
There's another one that says, can you buy the plants in a nursery?
You should be able to, but I've never tried that. It's so much more rewarding to grow them yourself. It's easy to take cuttings. I'm sure you probably have friends. If you're in the country, it's easy to find this plant on someone's property and ask if you can have some and just harvest it. and root it. It roots, it's really easy to grow. You can grow it easily from the seeds as well as from the cuttings, but it's probably faster from the cuttings, I would say.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions so far.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Well, I'm almost at the end of my talk, but there was one thing that I do want to touch on because I know that now that we're living in the time of COVID and pandemics and everything, people are really thinking about what they can use for themselves and their families to keep them healthy. And I have been getting some questions about elderberry syrup. Should I be taking it? Should I not be taking it? And if you Google it, there have been some links between elderberry syrup and something called a cytokine storm. And I want to talk about that really briefly because it's important. So what the cytokine storm is like I mentioned earlier, elderberries are immunomodulators. And so they increase the proteins that help you fight off diseases or fight off infections. And that's really what you want. But a cytokine storm is something much more than that. That is an ICU type urgent event. And taking elderberry syrups or using elderberries at any time has never been associated or found to be associated with anything as severe and extreme as a cytokine storm. The other thing I want to say about this is that yes, elderberries, Sambucus nigra, not Sambucus nigra canadensis, which is the North American variety of elderberry, have been very well tested, and they're pretty much extremely similar. They share the same compound profile for the most part, and they have been shown to be effective in helping to treat and lessen symptoms of respiratory illnesses. They've been shown to shorten the lifetime of symptoms in people with flus as well as people with colds. And a recent meta-analysis looked at several studies. I want to say it was like 6, it was either 4 studies or 6 studies, but it looked at those studies collectively. And what they were able to determine is that using elderberry supplements actually does actually improve your effects from like respiratory illnesses. So if you're suffering from cold or flus, taking elderberry supplement will help with symptom relief, especially if you take it early on. But in terms of whether it's going to cure cure COVID or anything like that, no, I'm not recommending that. And COVID is nothing like the flu. It's closer to structurally like a common cold, but it's nothing at all like the flu. So I'm not going to tell you that you should be taking elderberry to fight COVID. I would not say that, but I am going to say in terms of like helping preventatively and keeping you and your families healthy, I take it for my family, and I think that unless you have some sort of immunodeficiency, I think it's safe. All right, so just in conclusion, I just want to say a quick thank you to the tribes that have been participating in my research on not just elderberry, but on a lot of indigenous plants and sharing their traditional knowledge with me. And that's specifically the Wakamasuan tribe, the Halawasaponi tribe, and the Koheri tribe as well. I want to say a quick thank you to my community advisory board members, Mr. Greg Jacobs, Randy Bird, Archie Lynch, Darlene Graham, Linwood Watson, and Nancy Turner. If you're interested in more information about the North Carolina Native American Ethnobotany Project, please visit the website at ncnativeethnobotany.org. And I want to say a really special thank you to all of my elders and friends who have shared their traditional knowledge with me.
Yeah, there is a couple of other questions that came up. What is the appropriate dosage for homemade syrup?
Yes, so the appropriate dosage for homemade syrup is 1 to 2 tablespoons. So you can either take that every 2 hours if you are starting to feel symptoms, or if you're doing something preventatively, you can take 1 or 2 tablespoons a day.
And how do you recommend taking elderberry? Daily with food, etc.?
It doesn't necessarily have to be taken daily with food or anything like that. You can take it. You can take it in the morning. You can take it in the afternoon. As long as you are, if you're taking it in a cycle, you can take it like every, 1 to 2 hours every, take 1 or 2 tablespoons every 2 hours, like I said, during the day if you're feeling symptoms, or you can take 1 or 2 tablespoons just in the morning as a preventative.
Does it interfere with any other medications you take? Prescription.
That's a really good question, and not that I know of. I know that it's safe for children, and it's safe for women who are pregnant. Obviously, with children, you wouldn't want to give elderberry syrup to children who are under the age of 1, particularly if it has honey in it. Well, only because it has honey in it, right? And honey is not good for children under the age of 1. So beyond that, elderberry is safe. However, I'm not sure there's enough research on elderberry to say whether or not it will interfere with some of your other medications. So I don't feel confident speaking to that just yet.
Are there any credible books that you would recommend if you want to learn more?
Oh, absolutely. So one of my favorite resources, well, it depends on what you want to learn more about elderberry, or you want to learn more about indigenous plants and medicinal plant knowledge. Depends. So if you really want to learn more about medicinal herbs from just an herbalist perspective, my favorite go-to book for beginners is Rosemary Gladstar's book called Medicinal Herbs. And I mentioned it when I was talking about the recipe because I really like that recipe. So I would highly recommend her book. Could you speak to storage of elderberry syrup? Storage, yes. Let's see if I can see the chat. I can't quite find it, but speaking to storage of elderberry syrup, yes. So if you're using the honey, you can store it in your refrigerator for up to 12 weeks. If you are using it with alcohol, you can store it for, I would say, up to 6 months safely.
And someone asked, why not honey for children?
Because there's this risk, very minor risk for botulism in honey for children under the age of 1.
How many takes did you have to do to be filmed?
That's going to stay between me and my husband. It was a challenge, but thank you for noticing.
And how did you stay so neat and clean?
Oh, I just kept wiping it down and trying to keep it clean. So yeah, that was just one of those. It took a lot of takes to keep it clean. Trust me.
And Cody says, if anybody else wants to ask a question directly, you can unmute and feel free to speak up.
Yes, absolutely. I can see everyone now. So now that I close my presentation, I can see your faces. So please ask your questions.
You're getting a lot of thank yous.
Absolutely. I really hope that you guys found it informative and that you're actually able to use it. And if you do use it, please let me know. I just want to know how it works for you and how it tastes and if you like it.
Post the book that you were talking about for the natural herbs.
Mm-hmm. I can send you a link to that book. It's Rosemary Gladstar's Medicinal Herbs book. Absolutely, I can send you a link to that.
Thank you.
Hey, Tracy, I have another question. Thank you for your presentation. Could you talk a little about those dangerous lookalikes you mentioned? Are there any like keys we should look for?
Absolutely. So yeah, with the water hemlock, it looks very similar to elderberry, but it's actually closer to the carrot family. So the reason why those particular plants look very much alike is the flower head. So the water hemlock has a very similar flower head, but if you look at the stem or the base of those two plants, elderberry is very woody. And if you break open the stem of the elderberry, it has a pith inside, versus the water hemlock is an herbaceous plant. So it's herb all the way through. There's no part of it that's woody. And it's also green and more purplish. So that would be one way to be able to identify one from the other. The other one being the other plant that is not necessarily as deadly as water hemlock is Queen Anne's lace. So Queen Anne's lace looks very much like water hemlock because they're from the same family. And it's called Queen Anne's lace and wild carrot. You've probably seen it growing in roadsides all over. It's one of probably the predominant kind of a field pasture plant that you see during the summer. It has the large flower head that I mentioned with all the white flowers. And it kind of has, if you grow carrot, it has the very same kind of carrot smell and carrot leaves that you would expect to see. But again, the reason why those plants are look very similar is the flower heads themselves.
Hey, Dr. Locklear, this is Sherry. In the beginning, you mentioned the importance of being aware of your surroundings and looking around at nature. So I do have an app, and I try to walk around our neighborhood with the kids and use that to try to identify things, but I really don't know how safe that is and how accurate it is. Do you have any recommendations or suggestions for people that like to, go around their neighborhood and identify different things, but want to be sure they're identifying it correctly?
I do, and I am such a plant nerd. So I have downloaded, and let me see if I can find it here. I have downloaded this app. It's called PlantNet. So let me see if I can. It's called PlantNet. But anyway, so basically, let me see if I can show you this. So basically on PlantNet, you would take a picture of your plant and upload it into the app, and it'll give you suggestions on what it thinks your plant is. Do you see?
Yes.
So I absolutely love this app. So if I'm not 100% sure of a plant, I will take a picture of the flowers or the leaves, and I will upload it into PlantNet. And then it'll give me like suggestions from most likely to least likely. Okay. And then based on that, I'll go through and do like a taxonomic identification of the plant that I'm looking at. And I'll come up with like 100% accurate determination of the plant that I'm looking for.
Thank you.
And so that's like the best, that app has saved me. I really, really love it.
Any additional questions from anybody?
Now, who's going to make the elderberry syrup?
It sounds like you volunteered yourself, Miss Clarice.
All right. Well, I would like to thank Tracie for being with us this evening. And she's a wealth of information, and she's a local, a native here, a person here in the area. So I'm sure she would love to have you ask her any further questions outside of this particular program this evening. I would like to ask, just thank her for doing her part and sharing her expertise. It's nice to have someone so accomplished in our local area, and makes a lot of our tribes extremely proud, but all Native people proud. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise and being with us.
Thank you guys so much.
And this time I'd like to ask Danny Bell to give us a closing prayer. We had meant to open with a prayer, which is more traditional in our way of life. But Danny's going to give us a closing prayer for this evening's proceedings. And thank you all for being here. And we will have a speaker series next month. That person's to be determined. But I hope to get somebody who's just as accomplished as Dr. Locklear as well as Dr. Emmanuel.
Tell them about the community check-in.
We have a community check-in in September. We'll be sending that out on our listserv, as well as 2 talking circles planned, one on September 1st and one on October 10th, I think, if that's correct. And Alicia Freeman will be facilitating those 2 talking circles for us. And that also will be sent out on our listserv and posted to our Facebook page.
2 more things. One
Yes.
thing, Dr. Locklear, would you like to share your contact information in the chat so people can email you with questions if you'd like? And the other thing is that I posted a link to a survey. If everybody could take that, there's only a few questions to help us figure out what we would like to do for future events.
And I think Alicia had also posted a Facebook survey as well as far as talking circle topics for the future. So if you
Yes.
haven't replied to
in the
that,
American Society group.
yes, just go on there and complete that survey and give her some ideas as what you would like to see in future discussions. All right. So with that, we'll ask Danny Bell to give us our closing prayer.
Well, thank you. Breathe deep. Let us give thanks to the Creator for this breath that brings life to our bodies. Let us give thanks to the Creator for the gift of life we experience in this present moment. Creator, thanks for bringing Dr. Tracie Locklear-Beasley and her gifts into our community, as she gives us a better understanding of our American Indian life ways and a better understanding of our communities. Creator, go with us and guide our future days and activities towards stewardship. Help us to make wise use of our time and wise use of the gifts and the natural resources you have provided us. Aho.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all be well, stay safe, and have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Tracy.